Hi, Loish. Thanks for joining with us today and for taking some time to talk about your new book and some of your other things at the moment. This is being pre-recorded in advance of the launch of your next book, but I'm going to jump the gun and say congratulations on the launch of your new book. I guess I'll be the first person. And we started talking about this book over a year ago. So we've been talking about it for some time. But for the purpose of this interview, can you just imagine for a few minutes that you and I have never once talked about this book? And can you tell me a little bit about it and how it might be different from your previous two books?
Right, so the book is called The Style of Loish, which that's sort of the starting point, right? It's about my style, but it actually like the underlying idea of it was to go a level deeper. So when I first came up with the idea for the book, I didn't know it was going to be The Style of Loish just yet. I knew that I wanted it to be full of tips and advice to guide artists on their creative journey because that's been sort of, as an artist who gets a lot of questions about my technique, who has a lot of like younger followers who want to know how I do what I do, but also as somebody who has a secret passion for self-help books, I kind of wanted to go that way with this book. But I wanted it to be relevant and still be about my own art as a starting point because that's where the previous book started as well. But to just go deeper into the how and the why, and to help artists who are looking for that same thing in their own work, who are wondering, what is my style? What is my voice? What is it that I want to do with my art? So the book is centering around that. So my art is a starting point with tips and advice for other artists regarding style and regarding the development of your artistic voice.
That's great. So your previous two books, obviously, voice showcase your beautiful art. Like this one is, I guess, sounding like it's quite a lot heavier on the sort of instructional side or getting to think more about what artists themselves are doing in their own work. Is that what you say would be the main difference from your other books?
Yeah, because my other books, yeah, they really started out as like an art of, so it was like a collection of my work. But I found out, as I was making those books, so there's the Art of Loish and the Sketchbook of Loish, and they're showcases of my own work. But we always, from the get-go, included tutorials and tips in them. And that really resonated, I think, a lot with the readers. So as I got feedback from people who owned the books, they said like, "Oh, I followed the tutorial. This inspired me. I read this book and I tried out this technique." And I sort of, started to sense that the strength of those books was coming a lot from the way that the art was a jumping off point for other artists to try their own thing. And it kind of like inspired them. And so this third book leans, I think, like the core concept leans into that more than the previous one. So the previous ones have those qualities too, but this one really, is built on the idea that this is what the readers are looking for in my books, at least in this series of books. And that I really liked being able to do that from the start rather than it kind of being something that I discovered afterwards.
What is it that you particularly like about sharing your art within a book? Obviously, you share art on social media in a massive range of different places. But what is it you particularly like about sharing your art in a published book?
Well, social media is very like fragmented. It's very like a little bit here, a little bit there. It doesn't, it's very hard to go in depth on social media because it's all these smaller posts and it's very hard to keep people's attention. So I think people following my art on social media, they can see my work and get my tone of voice from the posts, but the big picture is like you have to dig deeper for that. Especially nowadays, I think social media is becoming more, like quick bites and fragmented more so than ever before. And what I like about a book is that you get the chance to tell a story and to go deeper. So you get the chance to introduce people, to bring you along in the story you want to tell. And that's something that's very hard to do on social media. It's even hard to do, I think, when making like tutorials. I generate a lot of learning content all the time for my Patreon. And even then, it's like you get people being a patron for a month and then they might go away again, right? So, and a book is something you really keep. So for me, the experience of making a book is much more an opportunity to tell a story. And that's why a lot of like all of like my previous books and this one tell the artistic journey from the start. and tell like sort of how I grew and developed my work from the very beginning to now. And that's something that I don't get the chance to really say in the same way. And I don't expect that it will stay with the reader as much as with a book. So that's what I really love about it.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think when the readers and those who buy the book get it in their hands, I think they'll really see some of that in the content. Particularly if they've got the other books as well, and they can sort of compare and contrast them. I think you can really see those elements, and it's really nice to actually see all the content because each of them are focused so differently. It's a lovely set to have. I've been looking at on Instagram, obviously, do it all the time for work, always researching artists. And in recent years, I've seen more and more artists who look very heavily inspired by the Loish style of painting. How does that make you feel to see so many artists so heavily inspired by you? And do you think this book might be helpful for them to find more of their own style or more of their own approach to the way that they create art?
Well, I think it's like, I think that social media skews very young most of the time, especially Instagram, specific platforms. And, especially the community that I'm in has a lot of young people that are very active in that community. And these are people who are searching for, their identity. So not just limited to art, but even who they are as people. And then that extends into their artistic voice. And young people are, they're searching for their voice, but they're also like absorbing influences and discovering, the world by, discovering new things and making it a part of them. And that's like sort of a natural process that I also went through when I was young. That's something I talk about a lot in the book, how my style sort of like came out of this bizarre mix of random influences that I just like completely made my own and absorbed, because I was very young and that's how my mind worked at that time. I was like looking for things that I liked, that I was drawn towards. And I think a lot of young people, a lot of young artists are sort of absorbing influences in these ways based on what they find and sort of having a very public like everybody can kind of see their art develop in real time, which is something that hasn't always been the case, right? A lot of artists like develop their taste and their style sort of in private, and then they gain a kind of platform as they are known for their own thing, right? But nowadays, people before they're known for their own thing are already kind of like trying out stuff, and we get to see that play out. And I'm apparently a part of that for other artists, and I think it's a massive compliment. It's very surreal for me because I feel like I only just, became a freelancer, even though it was quite a while ago already, but it still feels like very new to me. And then there are young people who are like, oh, I want to do what you do. And then I notice like, oh, what I do is seen as a career path for younger people, which is very surreal for me to experience. But on the other hand, I remember being a young student and kind of looking for examples and looking for people that, being like, what can I do? Like, I love drawing. What path can I follow? So I take the fact that I see people working in my style, basing a lot of their art on my techniques, which I actively, promote through my Patreon, as a massive compliment. And one of the reasons why I'm able to make a living off of, what I do, because these people are looking for guidance and are looking for a path forward, and they look to me to do that. And I'm more than happy to help. But I do, in my book, I talk a lot about how style is something that goes a level deeper than how something looks. So how art appears to look is the outside, and where that comes from is actually where the style, where the style originates from. So it's like, what are you trying to say? What are your priorities? What inspires you? How do you see the world? Those deeper things are sort of what creates a unique creative voice. And that's what I talk about a lot in the book. So I do think that, while it may seem like it's a book saying, oh, this is how you can draw in my style, it's actually not about that at all. It's how can you find your own style? How can you find like those unique characteristics that will cause you to develop your own artistic voice? So I think it'll be interesting. And I also am pretty open in the book about how absorbing other styles and trying out other styles is absolutely a part of anybody's artistic journey. So it depends on where you are in your journey, what you want to do at that point and what you want to learn.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think I can see artists going through that process that you were talking about there, and it's fascinating that we get to do that on Instagram, where historically that isn't something that's been sort of available to see all these artists developing. You've talked a lot about some of the sections in your book, which is great. Is there a part of your book that particularly stands out to you as being your favorite part, or something you think as being particularly interesting, or a piece of art that you particularly love in this third book?
Well, as with the previous books, I think my favorite part of the book is where I kind of talk about my artistic growth over time. Because then I can always kind of dig back. I literally go through my old work and my old sketchbooks and kind of go back in time thinking about how I got to where I am, which is something that I don't do that often, and kind of like making a timeline for how my style developed. And that's always a process. Doing that is like a process of where I also learn things about myself, and I get to share that and write like sort of a chronological story from that. And in the previous sketchbooks, the first chapters all do this. So the Art of Loish talks a lot about like, how I learned the skills that I have. And the Sketchbook of Loish talks about my relationship with like rough work and sketching throughout the years. And the Style of Loish talks a lot about like what, when I watched The Little Mermaid as a kid and how much impact that had on me. And when I discovered like the Powerpuff Girls and like anime and manga all at the same time, and it became like this mix of super colorful stuff that I was drawing. And it was really a trip down memory lane, and it's a lot of fun.
I'll never forget the day that we did the book launch for your second book, The Sketchbook of Loish. So we were in London, the top of the Waterstones, a building there, and
Yeah.
we had all of these people attend the event, and they just sat in front of us, and it was just such a huge group of people. And I gave a very short introduction to you, after which there was just the loudest roar I think I've ever heard from people, to the point where I almost felt like the floor was shaking. It was like hit me in the face, this noise from all these people so excited about getting to see you and getting to talk to you and getting to see this presentation, this live demo you're about to do for them, and then get you to sign their book afterwards. Do you ever feel the pressure of knowing there's this many people that are so desperate to see sort of your next painting or the next thing you come up with? Do you ever feel the pressure to come up with something new or different that they haven't seen before?
Yeah, that moment at Waterstones, that was a hard one for me because I wanted to cry and I couldn't. I had to keep it together. So that was really tough.
Me too.
Yeah, that was amazing. Like, that was one of the best experiences I ever had in my career. Yeah, that pressure, I have to say, like, I don't feel it all the time. So I think I have a sense of like I just need to separate myself sometimes from the fact that there are, so many people who follow what I do. Because if I had that in my mind all the time, I would lose it. It's just too surreal, really. And everyone has a different opinion, right, of like the kind of stuff they'd like to see. There are a lot of people who are like, oh, I'd love to see you do more, backgrounds and environments. And then there's other people who are like, I want to see more characters. I want to see more colorful stuff. Other people want to see darker stuff. And I can be really easily influenced by that if I, am constantly exposed to those kind of opinions. Like they do have an impact on me because I am very receptive to feedback. That's really where those books came from. The books are a lot of like the first time I ever decided to make an art book, before I even got in touch with 3dtotal and got the plans rolling, I was already thinking about, okay, well, what people want a book from me? What do they want to see? What kind of content do they want? And I already had a plan for that, before it had even happened. So I do need to shut myself off from influences like that in order to sort of connect with what I want to do. And doing Patreon has made that a lot easier. So setting up my Patreon account, because I've decided that, I want to generate a certain amount of artistic content for my Patreon every month. And I make it in my own time and then post that up to Patreon when that's ready. And then I don't post that on social media until the month after. So it's sort of created like this, like kind of more private space that I'm in. And if something, if I post something on Patreon and I decide a month later that I'm not into it anymore, or I'm not feeling that as much, then I don't have to post it either. I have some time between sending that out into the world and just posting it to a small group of people. And even then I can wait a little bit before I post. And that gives me some time to think about what I want to do. So creating a little bit of space, because otherwise I think I would have paralysis. I wouldn't know what to do or what to make.
We've talked before about the fact that when you were younger, you sort of moved around the world quite a bit. So you've lived for periods of your younger life in different countries. How do you feel that has influenced your art or influenced you as an artist as an adult?
It's hard to say. I did live in a lot of different places, but I was also living in kind of a bubble in all those places. Especially if you're somebody because there's like a whole community of people out there that all live somewhere for a short while before moving on. And then you don't connect to where you are as much because you're going to leave again. And you make friends, but they're not going to be around anymore after a while. They could move next year or you could move next year, right? So in a way, it's a bit isolating. So sometimes I think that it's actually now at this stage in my life that I'm starting to, develop stronger roots, and that is more expressed in my art. So my art was maybe less a result of exactly where I was before, but now, like, when I travel somewhere, I want to know the history of that place. I want to go to like museums and learn about it, and I make art based on what I've seen, and then I form a deeper connection with it. But that's only happening now, and it didn't happen a lot when I traveled. So it's kind of like the opposite of what you would expect, right? But I did think that it had a very positive impact in my art, in the sense that I went to like really great schools that had great art departments and really engaged, passionate teachers that always encouraged me from a very young age to keep drawing. So I always had art teachers that were like rooting for me, helping me out. And the first time I ever drew with a digital art tablet was because my school had ordered one, and I was allowed to try it out after school. And I got to draw with it as much as I wanted. So that kind of support, I think, is something that you could get anywhere, but I was lucky to get it through the schools that I went to. And that had a massive, incredibly positive impact on my art. So it's sort of a mixed, like, on one hand, I don't think that if I had traveled to all those places now, then all those cultures and places would have been more interwoven in my art. But if I hadn't have gone to those places, I may not have been encouraged as much as I was. So that's how it had the most impact on me.
That's amazing. I guess that sounds like you've pulled the positives from the different scenarios, and that's an amazing skill to have. I think that's really interesting. I've always had this theory whenever talking to concept artists or illustrators or character designers, that a lot of the media they absorbed in their younger years has a big impact on their art in the later years. So quite often I'll chat to someone and they'll say, "Oh, I love Transformers," or "I loved a Disney film in particular." That comes up all the time. And then as soon as they say that, I look through their art and I can start to see, some of those influence. Was there anything in your sort of the younger years of your life that really influenced you? You mentioned Little Mermaid already, but
Right.
How did that influence you as an artist, as an adult?
Well, The Little Mermaid, yeah, that was a massive influence on me. Like, I saw that as a kid, I think at a crucial stage in my life. So I was 4 years old and we had moved to the United States. So the first place that my family had moved to outside of where I was born. And I don't remember a lot. I remember only very small fragments because I was very young. But we were staying with another family for the first month or so. My mom will probably correct me on this, but yeah, maybe it was just a couple days, and in my like 4-year-old brain it was a month. But like, we stayed with some other people and they had two Little Mermaid VHS tapes for some reason, so they gave us one, and it was like our first possession, me and my big sister, that we had, and we would just watch it on repeat over and over and over and over. And I loved Ariel so much. Like, to me, she was the perfect person. She was just bubbly and beautiful and flowy and elegant and fun. And, you know, as a kid, I saw that and I was like, she is perfect. And I kind of never lost that idea. Like, even now, you know, my taste has changed a lot. And when I watch the movie now, I'm like, this is a strange story, honestly. It's sort of, I don't know, what's her, is this about how we should like just throw away everything we know for a guy we saw once? I don't know. It's has questionable parts, but I still, it's the vibe, right? And that is something that always stuck with me. And I am somebody that kind of sees the world in terms of like less in terms of the specific details and more in terms of the vibe and the mood. And that Little Mermaid vibe stuck with me forever. So I still feel like all my art, even the non-underwater art, is in some way mermaid art. So there's always like a floaty quality to it, and just the intense femininity of it. I really love that. I still do. So that had a huge impact. And then when I was 15, I sort of had another sort of hyper inspired year of my life when I discovered digital art. I discovered the Powerpuff Girls. I discovered like Star Wars and sci-fi and all this random stuff. And I just threw it together in a kind of pressure cooker of inspiration. And that's where my style just emerged from.
I love the fact you mentioned VHS then. It's so like there'll be people watching the interview and they'll be like, what VHS? They'll have to do Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. And the VHS, honestly, to me, the VHS tapes were like, if I watch a DVD or like a streaming version now, I would be like, I was disappointed sometimes, you know, because it's like too crisp. But
Yeah.
the VHS had the grainy, kind of blurry quality that was like almost like a filter or a texture that worked really well. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
the
funny,
lost
isn't it?
era.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we had all our Disney classics, all VHS. And yeah, I think that is the way perhaps they should be viewed.
Yeah.
You've obviously now you've got you'll have three art of books. So you got three books, all about these very different and interesting things, focusing on your artwork. You've also got now a wonderful following on Patreon, really active following on there, this huge social media following. What do you want to do next? Do you feel the urge to keep trying something new? Have you got any ambitions remaining that you really want to tackle, or are you just so busy taking on each of these current sort of things that you're doing at the moment?
I don't really know. I know that like during the pandemic, I kind of coped, you know, for the last year and a half, I coped a lot by working in a very structured way. And just, you know, getting the work done. That was like sort of a way for me to kind of fill up my time and have some distraction away from negativity. And now I'm just feeling the urge to like do the opposite for a very long time. I'm like, hey, you know, I should take a lot of time off and just do whatever I feel like. And I'm not sure what it is that I feel like doing just yet because I've been so, you know, I make a plan, I make a to-do list, and I do the tasks. And I've kind of lost touch with the ability to like kind of think, what do I feel like doing today? So I'm trying to make that possible by, I've got a bunch of new traditional tools to try out, and I've got like, you know, some clay and I've got some markers and different sketch, and I'm hoping that I'll just feel the urge to kind of try that stuff out. I'm definitely feeling more drawn towards traditional art, which is something that, you know, as a digital artist, I dabble in it sometimes, but I haven't found a really good strong workflow, so I'm wanting to do that more. But I really have no big plans. I think at this stage I need to have zero big plans ahead and just see kind of what will grow out of that for a while. I always did have a secret desire to make a self-help book for artists, to help artists like set their artistic goals and think about how they can implement like self-care into their artistic routine. But that's something that I think is like a distant future idea. And I did implement some of those ideas that I have into this book now. So I feel quite, you know, I'm satisfied that some of those ideas are out in the world, and I'm just gonna wait and see what comes out of some empty time in the coming weeks.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know how much work there is to go into a book of the size of your art of book. So Yeah, you've well deserved your break in your time away. I'm gonna bring an end to the interview then, but I'm gonna say a huge thank you, Lois, not just for talking with me today, but for the 3 books that you've worked on with us at 3Total. We love your books so much, and it's an absolute pleasure for us to be able to publish them. So, an absolutely massive thank you from me. And I know that the designers and editors all in the rooms over there working on them at the moment, they absolutely love your content. It's such a pleasure to work with. So. On behalf of everyone at 3Total, thank you so much for working with us, and thank you for speaking to us today.
Oh, thank you so much for working with me. The honor is all mine. So thank you. I'm so glad that we worked together, and it's always been a wonderful collaboration. So same to you.
Thank you. Thank you.